What if the people who really own your favorite football club, the one making the biggest decision, are complete strangers? Strangers hiding behind the maze of shell companies scattered across secretive islands, making it almost impossible to know who they are or where their money truly comes from. This isn't some wild conspiracy theory. This is the documented reality of the world's richest league. Researchers at the University of Manchester recently peeled back the layers of Premier League ownership, and what they found was truly shocking. For the majority of clubs, it's not possible to trace the complete ownership structure through public records. It just vanishes into a fog of legal secrecy. So the question isn't if money can be hidden inside a football club, but how deep the rabbit hole really goes. Hi, my name is Julia. I am a certified anti-money laundering consultant, anti-money laundering specialist. If you watched any of my videos before, or even if this is the first video of mine that you see, you might notice that I have an accent, and this is because I'm Italian. I think Italy is famous for three things: pizza, mafia, and football, or soccer, depending on which strand of English you speak. Now, I am not a football expert. I'm not into football. I don't care at all about it. But there is one thing that I care about, and that thing is beneficial ownership. Yes, you heard me right. Beneficial ownership has a lot to do in football. So let me tell you about that. For years, fans and journalists have worried about the growing lack of transparency in football ownership. But a groundbreaking study from the University of Manchester provided the data. The researchers analyzed football clubs against three criteria: the complexity of their ownership chains, the use of jurisdictions known for financial secrecy, and the ultimate inability to identify the ultimate beneficial owner, the actual people at the very end of the line, the ultimate person that owns the football club. The researchers found, quote, conditions which are known to be associated with the use of organizational structures for illicit activities. In other words, the researchers says that the owners of the football clubs use opaque ownership structures similar to what organized criminals would use to hide their illegal activities. The study noted that some of the biggest clubs had incredibly complex structures, with some ownership chains featuring over a dozen distinct legal entities. The study revealed that many Premier League clubs have corporate entities registered overseas, including in so-called secrecy jurisdictions like Jersey or the Cayman Islands. These are places notorious for making it difficult to find out who owns what. The study's most damning finding was that for 12 of the 20 clubs analyzed, at least 10% of the ownership could not be formally tracked back to a real person because of the secrecy provision, which does not necessarily mean that these clubs were not held by individuals, but just that the secrecy law in the countries where these clubs are held do not allow for information to be disclosed. For legal reason, I will say that the researchers aren't accusing any specific owner of criminal activities. Please don't sue me. They argue that the very structure of ownership in the Premier League creates vulnerabilities. It creates the possibility of hiding who truly owns the club, and it creates the possibility of hiding where the billions flowing into the game really come from. The system itself, they conclude, presents a huge obstacle for any regulator trying to figure out if the people buying the clubs are, in the words, fit and proper. A fit and proper person test is a legal and regulatory standard assessing someone's character, competence, integrity, and honesty to hold a certain sensitive position. A fit and proper test aims to ensure that the person is trustworthy, law-abiding, and capable of handling funds or adhering to regulation, with factors like criminal history, financial misconduct, and professional conduct. If we do not know who the ultimate beneficial owner of a long chain of companies that want to purchase a football club is, we simply cannot perform a fit and proper test on that person. So how does all of this actually work? How can billions of pounds and the identities of powerful people can be hidden? The easiest way to think about it is like a set of Russian dolls. The football club is the biggest box in the outside, what everyone can see. It's owned by a company, which is the next doll down. The company in turn is owned by another company, and so on and so on. This is a classic technique known as layered corporate chain. Each layer, each shell company makes it harder to see who's really at the core. Now imagine some of those dolls are registered in the UK or Australia or the Netherlands, all jurisdictions where ownership information is pretty public. I consult it every day as part of my day job as an anti-money laundering consultant. Instead, these companies are registered offshore in financial centers, places like the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, or certain United states like Delaware. These places have high secrecy scores, meaning the laws are designated to protect the identities of company owners. All of a sudden, you open a door and find that the next one is a black box. No more information available. You'll never know who owns that company. This opaque beneficial ownership structures make football clubs vulnerable to money laundering schemes and financial crimes. The United Kingdom National Risk Assessment 2025 notes that football is the UK's national game and the most watched sports in the world. Football is an economic powerhouse, with the Premier League clubs having had a turnover exceeding £6 billion in the 2023-2024 seasons. This factor makes football and football club an enticing opportunity for legitimate ownership, but also an attractive target for criminals, kleptocrats, and other malign actors seeking to launder their criminal funds or generate further illicit gains. At the very top of the game, football is usually profitable, but below that elite level, many clubs are struggling financially. When clubs are under financial pressure, they become far more vulnerable to criminal exploitation. Criminal networks may step in offering easy money in exchange for ongoing access to the club. That access can then be used to facilitate money laundering, illicit betting, match fixing, fraud, and bribery, or simply to park illicit funds in what looks like a legitimate business. The laundering of suspect proceeds of crimes can happen through multiple channels. The UK National Risk Assessment considered that common methods to money laundering includes inflated or manipulated players' transfers, falsified ticket sales, and fake or inflated invoices for services provided by high-risk commercial sectors, merchandise sales, sponsorship deals, and image rights arrangement involving clubs or players can also be misused to disguise illicit funds. Player transfers are particularly high risk. Unlike most assets, player values are extremely difficult to assess objectively. The lack of a clear market price makes transfers an ideal vehicle for manipulation, allowing criminal money to be moved, inflated, or disguised under the cover of legitimate football transaction. Let's say, for example, person A wants to sell an illicit substance to person B, and they both, let's say hypothetically, own a football club. To be able to sell to each other this illicit substance, they mask the transaction through a transfer of a player. So person A sell a certain player to the football club owned by person B, but with the transaction, they also put the illicit substance that person A wants to sell to person B. The final transaction is, let's say, £10 million, but £5 million is for the transfer of the player, and £5 million is for the transfer of the illicit substance. It is very difficult for an external person to determine that £10 million are allocated, some for an illicit transfer and some for the player, because £10 million for a player, it's not that crazy, it's not that unheard of. It might not alert anything. It might be considered normal. I have another video in which I talk more about price manipulation. I'll link it in the description. Go check it out. What can citizens do, football fan, people in general, what can journalists do, and ultimately what do the regulator do currently, or can they do to improve the situation? It's important to be aware of red flag, to make football clubs accountable, trying to hold football club accountable for what they do. The first red flags to look for is the opacity of the ownership, beneficial ownership. If we are not able to know who's the owner of a certain football club, this is a first red flag that something that then a high risk situation could happen, or that something could be hidden. So if you do not know who owns your football club, you're not able to trace it back to a person, that it's already a problem in itself. Second, watch out for the money flows, especially for players' transfers. Are there huge payment for new players or unproven players or very young players that maybe would not grant such a huge payment, or players being sold quickly in a rapid succession of transfer between clubs? This could all be signal of money being transferred for other reason other than the player. Third, look at where the loans and sponsorship are coming from. Is a club suddenly getting a massive cash injection from an unknown entity with no public profile? Are sponsorship deals coming from related parties, companies that are secretly connected to the club's owner? These deals can be directly routed for placing illicit funds into a club's account. On the regulation side, things are changing in the space, at least in the United Kingdom. The Football Governance Bill was introduced in 2024 and passed as a law in 2025. This is arguably the biggest change in football governance that has ever occurred, or at least in the recent time. At its heart, the Act creates a new independent football regulator, or IFR. The IFR will run a licensing system for all clubs in the top 5 tiers of English men's football. To get a license, club will have to prove that they have a solid financial and corporate governance. The IFR is said to have power to dig deeper into owners' sustainability and finances. Crucially, the IFR will have the power to demand information and investigate. Its power will include imposing huge financial penalties and, in extreme cases, pursuing criminal sanctions. Perhaps most importantly, the regulator will have the power to force the owner to sell the clubs as a last resort, something that has never been possible before. The new AFR is expected to work closely with the UK National Crime Agency to share information and to coordinate. The new regime will not be an instant fix. The IFR is being set up now, with its full licenses system expected to roll in 2026-2027 season, but for the first time, an independent body will have the legal power to demand transparency far beyond the fit and proper person test that has been the norm so far. I really don't like football. This is probably the most time in my life that I spend reading, thinking, and talking about football, and truly hope this is also the last time. But as an anti-money laundering, especially the crossroad between money laundering and football is hard to ignore. This video isn't saying that football club owners are criminals. Most aren't, but the system they operate in allows criminals to hide in plain sight. When ownership is opaque, regulators can properly assess who is fit and proper. When money flows aren't transparent, illicit fund can be mixed with legitimate revenue. And when accountability disappears, the risks multiply, not just for the clubs, but for the integrity of the game itself. The introduction of the independent football regulator is a major step forward. For the first time, someone will have the legal power to ask uncomfortable question and demand real answer. Whether that power is used effectively will determine whether football becomes more transparent or whether secrecy simply adapts and survives. Only time will tell. If you made it till here, thank you so much. My name is Julia. I'm a certified anti-money laundering specialist. In my day job, I help businesses comply with anti-money laundering laws. Here on YouTube, I talk about money laundering, football. No, I never talk about football, just only today. I will never talk about football ever again, unless something extremely interesting happens, but I doubt. Financial crimes, things like that. If you're interested, please comment, like, subscribe. Also give me a follow on LinkedIn where I do talk about more money laundering, more from a professional point of view. And I'll see you on the next one.